For this exercise of the chapter, we're going to build a class called the node class. And we're actually going to use this later on in the course when we work with data structures. A lot of data structures require an object called a node, which is used to hold data and references to other nodes in, for example, a linked list. But here I just want to use the idea of a node to demonstrate how to work with a generic class. So let's go ahead and build the node class. First thing I want to do is make sure I don't already have it built. So the node class will just have one type parameter, and that will be for the type of data the node is going to store. So our field is data, and it's of type T. We use the type parameter there because we don't know in advance what the type is going to be. Our second field is a field called next, and it holds a node that the current node will be pointing to. Our constructor takes data of T type. Again, we'll decide that at runtime. And assigns it to the data field. And then our next field will be automatically assigned the value null. Last thing we want to do is provide a way of getting the piece of data out of the node object. So we'll use a getData method here. And it just returns the data. So it's a very simple class, as you can see. So let's exit and save. Then let's compile it. Make sure everything works correctly, and it does. So the next thing we need to do is create a program to use our node class. And so we're going to create a program called linked list that will use nodes to create a very primitive linked list. We'll do a better job later in the course, as I mentioned earlier, of creating linked lists. But for now, I just want to demonstrate how to use nodes. Let's get to the beginning of the program here. The first thing I want to do is create a node of string type. And we'll store a name in the node. Then we'll create another one. And actually, let's just go ahead and create a third. That's node 3. So each of these nodes' next field automatically points to null. So what we want to do is we want to link them up. So we're going to say node1.next equals node2. Node2.next equals node3. And then we want node3.next to point to null, although it already does. And actually, we don't want it to point to null. So what we're going to do is, let's change that. Let's create another node. We're going to call it a footer. Lots of different names we could use for that. And it will be what node 3 points to, so that it will be the last node in the linked list. We could also create a header node, but we won't do that for this example. So the next thing I want to do is create a dummy node. In fact, I'm going to call it that. And we're going to assign it the value node1. And then we're going to say while dummy.next is not equal to null, write out the data for that node. Then to move through the set of nodes, we just say dummy is equal to dummy.next. And so what that's going to do is that's going to move us from node 1 to node 2 to node 3. Then it's going to move us to the footer node, which will trigger the end of our while loop. Let's close out the main and close out the class. So let's save the file. Go back to our command prompt window and let's compile. And it compiles fine, so then let's run it. And there's our 3 names. So what we want to look at is not the linked list code, but just to refresh our memory on how to write a generic class, let's look at the node class again. And so we just use the type parameter where we need to use it, and primarily with a node, it's going to be used to represent data. Then we can create nodes of any type we want. Here I created strings, but there was no reason I couldn't create a linked list of integer nodes, or a linked list of Boolean nodes, or a linked list of our own data type, like our own defined class, or I could have even mixed them, although it doesn't really make sense to mix names and numbers all that much. But I primarily wanted to show you how a generic class might be used in practice. And that sums up how to use generic classes, and that brings us to the end of this chapter.